presence at a local board office or some other monitored location. If you have technical issues, please contact Zoom directly. And everyone watching will be muted, but if you're at a local board participating for credit, feel free to just wave your hand at us, get our attention if you have a question, and we will unmute you for that. If you're not participating for credit, you can type in your questions in the Zoom chat box. The icon for that chat box should be at the bottom of your screen. And this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will live long after this presentation is over. It'll be available on our website. The slides are already posted on our website right now under the events page, and you'll be able to access this by selecting past webinars on that page. And the recording will be made available there as well, in addition to our TAR YouTube channel. So again, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Meggie Mei. She's the founder of Mei Auctions, an auction brokerage firm, and is a licensed auctioneer in several different states. She specializes in asset liquidation, acquisition, exclusive auctions, and global auction marketing. So she's here with us today to cover how this specialized marketing approach attracts international buyers and how it can integrate seamlessly with traditional conventional sales to achieve the highest probability of a successful transaction. So I'll turn it over to Meggie and get this webinar started, and we'll visit back at the end with some more TAR updates. So Meggie, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. Good morning to everyone who's watching right now, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to promote the auction method. So you will understand how to use this, the auction method in your toolkit, and when to use it, how to use it to increase your revenue. And before I started, I would like to just give a few minutes, briefly introduce myself. Let's go to, oh really? Give a little bit background. I've been doing full-time auctions since 2016. I grew up in China. I came to US for my second master degree and was from a different major. And then I decided to start on business. And the reason I choose auction is I've been very familiar and very active in auctions when I was in China, either from the seller side or the buyer side. So I totally understand how the auction works in Asia, and also, I mean, the way we learned about auction in Asia is from the European style. And I find it Mei Auctions, which is the auction brokerage firm, is not only real estate, but in auction as a general. I licensed in several states, not only in Texas. I just moved in Texas last year, as my husband is in the service. So we moved to Fort Hood area last year. My Texas real estate license is with Fort Worth, United Country Fort Worth office. And I specialize for the real estate. I specialize all type of real estate. I do only real estate auctions. I don't do traditional listing. And when I approached to Tiffany, and I believe in auction method. I think auction to me is like the best way to sell the real estate. It's traditional listing is a different way to sell it. For me, that's the only difference. And it's amazed me that when I talk about auction with a lot of people, the only perception they have is if I told them I do real estate auction, then they will automatically thought about foreclosure auctions. So far, I haven't done any foreclosure auction yet. I do non-stressed real estate property auction. And the reason I want to talk about the auction stigma before I go forward with the auction method and introduce all the types of auction and why you should do auction. For me, I come from a different country than, grew up in US, so I have totally different perspective as far as the auction is concerned. In the world that I grew up and I'm familiar with the auction method is, to us, the seller should be very proud or feel privileged to have their property put on auction market because you received the exclusive attention. You have the whole auction team work for your property only. You design the marketing program that's only for your properties to attract the right groups of buyers. So that's been very popular in a lot of countries, such as Australia, Canada, South America, African or Asian, such as China or Japan. If you're dealing with a lot of real estate business overseas, and you're probably familiar with auctions sometimes or heard of auctions. And that's why I made a statement here, globally auctions are the preferred way to buy and sell real estate. Okay, to the next one. Okay, before I talk about how the real estate auction is, I want to talk about why. Because I talked to several realtors, and that's the first question they asked me, why they should put their real estate listing on auction instead of traditional listing. For me, all the real estate properties can be on auction market. But for the realtors, have been using the traditional listing as primary way of selling the real estate. It might take a little bit time to understand. So I would like to explain the reason, the benefit of having properties sold on the auction. Might help you a little bit. And of course, the auction creates the competition. So for residential property and in a hot market, you should be able to receive multi-offers in a short period. If it's a residential property, you might receive a couple offers in a couple days or 1 or 2 weeks or in a month. But why don't you utilize that multi-offers and drive the price upper? So instead of having them put in your offers one time, if you use the auction method, you might be able to let them compete or submit the offers twice or 3 times or more often than the first offers they submitted to you. And the traditional listing, traditional sales, not providing that platform, that environment for you to facilitate that sale in such way. And also the auction process is very transparent. So the seller and the buyers are able to see everything is published. The seller able to see how many offers in front of them. The buyers able to see how much others potential buyers submitted, how much they're bidding. So that's the platform we provided, and we offer a very fairness competition to all the parties. And also in the real estate auction, the seller has full control, like when the auction will be, where the auction will be, and the auction terms and condition, they have a say in that, except the selling price. So if it's an absolute auction, the seller has zero control once we open the bid. And also the auction is the only method that reviews the current fair market. We provide a platform and let the market determines the price instead of going through the asking price and reduce the price. In auction world, I'm not in favor of reducing the price. That's just you create the market for the potential buyers now looking at your properties from the asking price in order to reduce the lower, that give them a misleading concept. Your property might be worse than the asking price. So I'm really not in favor of that reduction, the price reduction. And if it's foreclosure, REO, or government asset liquidation, that auction is probably the only way that can satisfy those judicial requirements because the transparency and all the process being published. and all the bidding price being transparent presented to both parties. And also the auction, one of the popular reason is it creates excitement. If it's a live event, it's from the moment that auctioneer opened the bid to the closing bid, in a very short period. That's not only it generates the competition, but also it generates the excitement through other ways like the auction chant. If you are familiar with the cattle auction, the car auctions, and you should obviously see that excitement. The buyers is very actively participate in submitting the price. And the auction creates a sense of urgency. And that auction is the only way that there's no other method of marketing should be able to accomplish this sense of urgency. And auctions are proven to be immediate, exciting, and very effective. And if you are dealing with 1031 exchange, the moment you accept the deal, you're basically working on a deal on the clock. So the auction actually might be very positive, very helpful to facilitate those 1031 sales. We're able to control the sale day, which is going to be the auction date. In a traditional listing, it's really to guarantee a sale date. And also, we have unlimited flexibility to use multi-parcel auctions or multi-family properties auctions, not only the single listing, but you can have one or two or duplex or multi properties that's to be on the auction at one time. Mommy. All right. So virtually to the auctioneers, we can auction all type of real estate properties, from the single family, multi-family, all the way to the commercial investment, the land, resort, oil, gas property, winery, and in all kinds of property, you name it, the auction able to sell them. So to us as the auctioneer, it's the matters of how you sell it, what type of the right group of buyers to attract to, instead of focus on the location of the property or the type of property you should specialize in. To us, the real estate or the personal property, they're the same. They're just item for us to sell. We have a different approach. It doesn't mean that I don't care about the location, the property information. I do. The differences between us and the traditional listing is we put 100% very exclusive attention on every single properties to study the property information in order for us to market to the right group of buyers. Compared to the traditional side, you might have less attention to every single properties because of the volume we've been dealing with every day or every month. And I would like to spend more time actually on the next slide to help you understand a little bit more. So if you look at your listings, let's see, what are those listings you might be able to offer that way and that auction method to your clients to sell it. So let's, for example, those just examples not only limited to those the category I listed on the slides. But those will be very ideal, more ideal than other type. So we have two criteria for the seller for the property to be qualified as the auction property. We need to qualify the seller. We need to qualify the property. So when I mentioned about qualify the seller, and if you're looking at the last bulletin, urgency, how motivated the seller is. I had this conversation with another realtor the other day. when we discussed about one property she has, and she told me the seller is ready to sell, very motivated. But after went through a couple questions, I thought the seller is not motivated enough to sell the property. So I asked one question, and then she responded to me, and then I figured out, okay, so the seller is ready to sell, but the seller is not motivated enough to sell the property now. The sellers wait. It's okay to wait for 6 months, to wait for a year, or even longer, 2 or 3 years. To my opinion, the seller is not ready to sell. And all of you are experienced in real estate. I mean, the market, the price today might be different than tomorrow, or the price this month might be different than last month or next month. The longer you wait, the market changes. So if the seller's not ready to sell, when we get down to the conversation and gets to serious, you can tell how committed the seller is. So if the seller can wait for 6 or a year, for us, the seller is not ready to sell. The seller is not ready to accept whatever the price the market determines now at this moment. And on the other side, when I mentioned about qualify the property, and you're looking at those top bulletin, if it's high demand listing, I mentioned it, I touched it a little bit in the beginning. If it's hot properties in a hot market, you have 10 or 20 multi offers. And I think the property should be and very good to put on the auction, because it generates the excitement and generates the competition in a very short period. It will drive the price up. And the dead listing in a clear buyer's market, for example, you have a listing that's being on the market, you put on the market several months, 6 months, or even a year before it gets expired. And that market, when the listing is on the market, actually it's not seller's market, but obviously it's buyer's market. If you use the auction method, it is fair game to the seller, because you let the buyer determine the price. But again, the seller has been willing to accept whatever the price the market determines. Otherwise, you should not offer the auction method to your seller, to your client. And the expired listing, I hate to see a lot of realtors to let go of a lot of their listing that, haven't been sold within the contract time and expire, and the seller did not renew the contract with you. I would say that time, please do consider other way. Maybe the property is overpriced. Maybe the property needs different approach, marketing approach, to attract the right group of buyer. Just for example, the one I have, the contract is in pending. It is a residential, but that property is very unique compared to other residential property. It has its own airplane landing strip. So it's been on the MLS for quite a while, and the seller or the listing agent realized they need a different approach, because it requires the potential buyer list is very limited. Not everyone is ready or willing or can afford to buy those type of residential property. It does need a extra efforts or big exposure to the potential buyer list. And REO, of course, it fits the auction criteria. You can sell a bunch of them at one time. It goes well with the multi-property auctions. Okay, so now let's get down to the differences of the traditional listing and the auction process. I'm going to touch a little bit, just a few minutes on the traditional cycle, and you can correct me when we get to the Q&A if I, got it wrong, the cycle. So normally in the traditional way, the clients engage you to sell the property, and then you develop and execute the marketing campaign, and then you're managing the marketing process, and then you might go back to your clients and discuss or do some changes in your marketing to attract more buyers. So the circle usually 90 to 1 year. Of course, if you have a property, residential properties in a very hot market, it might go well in 1 or 2 months. But I think normally that's the timeline is looking at 90 to 360 days. But now you're looking at the auction circle. That's the difference. So the auction cycle normally is 60 to 90 days, unless the property is very unique, require more efforts and more time to research, and require more marketing times to attract the right group of buyers. And normally for those property, like the specialty properties for us to call, like oil and gas, and a large acre of ranches or other specialty properties might require a little longer, more days to complete the auction cycle. But usually you're looking at 60 days or more days out, starting the initial consultation. We have to qualify the seller and the property first before we even say yes or no to move forward with the auction method. In the auction world, that a lot of auctioneers are fully aware that it's time to say no to the seller. We walk away. We don't take every single deal in front of us because of the criteria we're looking at, the seller and the property itself. And once we decided the property is qualified property, the seller is highly motivated, is ready to sell as of this moment, is willing to accept whatever the market determine the price present to them. And then we go ahead, develop a marketing plan. We go ahead, implement the marketing plan. And then normally the day we decided go ahead with the auction method, in our auction proposal, we already have a proposed auction days. Normally it's about 4 to 6 weeks from the date you sign a contract, the seller signed the contract. So we have the auction days, and if it's absolute auction, which means there's no reserve, it is a guaranteed sale. So it's guaranteed sold on the auction day or prior to the auction. It depends how the terms the seller negotiates. So that is circle in a very short period, very efficient. It fits well with a lot of properties. It fits well with commercial too. Normally in the traditional side, the commercial takes longer time than the residential, and because of negotiation and back and forth between the seller, between the buyer. You have the legal team involved. We have the brokers involved. When you have the auction in the commercial deal, it reduces the negotiation because most of the price negotiation happens during the auction day, during the auction time. Okay. Now I would like to introduce a little bit on the auction bidding type. Those are the 3 types. Of course, there's several other types of auction bidding types, but usually you can see in the market all those 3 primary types. You have the absolute auction. As I mentioned, we usually call it guaranteed sale. And you have the minimum bid auction, and you have the auction with reserve. And usually the auction with reserve, the reserve price is not published, is not disclosed. So when we talk about the absolute auction, so basically when the auctioneer opens the bid to the end of the auction, when we close the auction, the highest bid wins. You cannot withdraw. The seller has no control. The seller cannot withdraw once I open the bid. So the highest bid wins. And this type of auction usually generate the most interest among buyers because of the opportunity to win the property when they have the final bid. Sometimes the seller people or the realtor have a little bit concern about this absolute auction, although it is my most favorite auction type. When they heard about absolute, they automatically had that concept is that going to be sold really, really cheap? I disagree. I don't think so. Without set a minimum bid price, the auctioneer can open the bid at any price. We have the fully control. The auctioneer have the fully control, have more control to facilitate, to drive the price, unless the buyers open bid. So again, it go back to the property. What is your fair market price? That determine the market determine the price. So if your property worth of 100,000, you shouldn't worry about your property be sold at $1. I don't think there's no way other buyers will let that happen. So let's go down to the minimum bid. This is a little bit less popular than the absolute auction. However, it does attract a lot of buyers same time because of the starting or the minimum bid. Usually we set it low enough to attract them and potentially provides a reasonable price for the buyer. And the bidding price begins at minimum acceptable price to the seller, so that the seller is participate in determining the minimum price. So that means the auctioneer, when we start open the bid, we starting at the minimum price and then go all the way up. We don't reduce the price. The price will continually go up instead of going down. And now let's go to the auction with reserve. So in this type of bidding type, the seller, the listing agent, if there's a listing agent involved, which gonna be you, if it's your list, and then the auction team. Only these three parties knows the confidential minimum price. Normally is not disclosed to the public. There are sometimes you will see a reserve with disclosed price, but that's very rare. If it's a seller decided to publish the for good reason, we can do that, but usually it's not disclosed, the minimum price, the reserve price. And we find a lot of buyers is less appealing because they don't know the minimum threshold. They didn't know the reserve price, so that intimidate them a little bit. However, there's a lot of type of properties use auction with reserve because you're looking at the buyers are sophisticated. They do their own research before they register bid. They know what they're bidding on. It works well with with the commercial property or specialty property, or some luxury residential property or investment type. You're looking at those investors; they're very sophisticated. They look at the numbers and that help them to determine the price and if they're willing to bid and how much they're willing to bid. However, in this type of bidding types, auctioneer has less control on the price. So what happened is all three parties, the seller, the listing agent, and the auction teams knows the confidential minimum price. So once the auctioneer opened the bid, the auctioneer will carry on the bidding until the last final highest bid at that moment. And then the auctioneer will suspend the auction and we'll go back to the seller and the listing agent, if there's the listing agent present or involved, asking for the seller's opinion. The seller has full control that moment. If it's over the minimum price, then the seller still has the right to decide it if the seller willing to accept the highest bid price at that moment. If not, then the auctioneer has to go back to the auction site, continue the auction to get more bidding going on until you exhaust it, and then the highest bid price stopped, you go back to the seller, asking for the opinion again. So there's a lot of negotiation going on, and the seller has a final say. And for these type of bidding process, the seller has to be very motivated. Otherwise, you will see a little bit delay in the process. And there are also primary types of auction method. Not only limit to this, but normally in the real estate auction, you will see either a live auction, live event, or online only, or simulcast. You have an online and a live. And of course, there's other type of, sometimes you will see auction that it started online and the ends closed at a live event. And you will see sometimes it's online and live at the same times. So there's other way to do it, and there's a seal bid auction too. But normally you will see these three types of auction method to sell the real estate property. So the live auction, in this type of live event, basically is live auctioneers in an open setting. The qualified bidder, once they register, they qualified, they registered, they got the bid numbers. When the event begin, they can start bidding, raise their paddle, start bidding. It's between the auctioneer and the bidders. It's a negotiation. So these type of events normally held at a boardroom for multi-property listing. That means more than one property going on at the same time, or it could be on site for that single listing. And the live auction fits well with some specialty properties, normally ranch or farmland fits very well. It depends on how the buyers react to that. Certain type of buyers, they love those live environment, they love that live excitement. And then the next one is online only. This type of auction method attract very well, and if you go global, this is the best auction method to use. It really doesn't matter where you are, where the buyers are, as long as they have internet connection or computer, they can bid. So this fits well with the global market. You're looking at one properties can be sold to a buyer live anywhere else. Doesn't have to be, if you have a listing property in Austin, the buyers could be somewhere outside state or even international overseas. And the next one is getting popular. That's what sometimes we use as simulcast. So you have online and a live auction at the same time. So what happened is we have live event going on, but at the same time we do like a broadcasting live. So the buyers that cannot be able to participate in the live event, they should be able to watch the live event online, and then also doing the bidding at the same time. So this is a great combination. It gives the excitement as a live event. It gives the experience, but at the same time, it does not limit the buyer's location. The buyers still can bidding online, but having that live event experience. So this fits very well, and we use it a lot of times for all type of properties, and you can do it real estate or personal properties. And when we talk about global listing, I want to save it until this last slide, because when Tiffany asking about this, the strengths why using the auction method, I believe the auction has a very unique marketing plan that's different than the traditional listing. I know realtors do your own marketing, but as far as I know, is majority of the marketing plan is localized. If you sell residential, it's posted on the MLS, and then whatever other marketing channel you have to attract the right buyers. However, to the auction side, we tend to expose the property to a larger audience, to a larger crowd. Depends on what kind of property, and we figure out what type of buyers we want to market to. So we usually do local, of course, national, and global, not only from the traditional marketing, but I use a lot of auction channels, especially, the brokerage I'm dealing, the auction brokerage I'm dealing is more toward overseas Asian market. So that gives more advantage to the sellers to attract the buyers. You never know who's going to buy your property. And also from the buyer side, a lot of time the buyers has to be actively searching the property you want in order to find the listing information. In the auction side, we proactively promoting, we're approaching the buyer instead of waiting for the buyers to find us. So that is different. One of the difference in the marketing approach. We do give 100% attention to the seller's property. Of course, you do too. You give them the 100% exclusive attention. But for us, we make a little bit further steps to them. It's based on, that's why sometimes we require more time to do the research on the property. We do not only based on the com. We collect, gathering, or other information that we think useful to attract the right group of buyers, because we need to know who can buy the property before we approach them. We don't do a lot of general marketing. We do on the social media, but to the direct mailing and all that, we do more exclusive listing. We know who they are. We know the percentage of those response to our auctions. And those are the difference, and that gives, for me, that gives the global reach to my channel when I do the properties. All right. I say I'm going to leave more time to the Q&A so we can open up the conversation discussion. And Tiffany, Amy, I think I need your help, or?
Here we are.
Okay.
So we do have a good question. Someone asks, if the property uses an auction method, will it go on the MLS as well?
We can post it on the MLS. It all depends on how seller wants. The seller normally decided, we do not close that door. It says we do not post it on the MLS. Of course, we use that. It is a very powerful, marketing tool for us. And it normally works very well for the residential properties.
So, and then along those lines, I was wondering, do you use the same kind of listing agreement if somebody comes to you with an auction property? How does that whole transaction start?
Okay, so once we decided the property is auction candidate, the listing agreement will be superseded by the auction agreement. The auction agreement would become an amendment to your listing agreement. So, and Amy, do you want me to go further about from the listing agent perspective? Is that the question is?
Absolutely. Let's see
Okay.
what happens. And I just want to jump in and remind everybody that if you do have a question, go ahead and type it into the Q&A box on your screen, and I can see them on my end and make sure that Meggie hears them. So yeah, let's talk about how the listing process starts.
Okay, so if you have a listing and you present it, but first of all, I will advise you not to present it, not to offer the auction method to your client without consulting with the auction team, because again, the property might not be suitable for the auction method. So let us work together and decide if it's good, And then we present it to the seller with the auction proposal. And then if the seller all agreed and all highly motivated, ready to sell, then the auction agreement kick in. It becomes your amendment to your listing agreement. And I know we cannot discuss about the commission in detail, but I would say whatever the commission you negotiate with the seller remains there. For the only difference as far as the commission is concerned is the buyer's commission. We would take care of the buyer's agent commission from our the buyer's premium. So normally, let's touch about that. So normally at the auction, there are always additional fee in addition to the closing price, purchase price, which we call buyer's premium. The buyer's premium is not only the commission compensation to the auction, but to offset some of the auction marketing in addition to the seller's marketing share. So we would have that the buyer's broker fee out of that buyer's premium. So everything remains, your commission remains whatever in your agreement. I would highly suggest you to reduce it, because you're not, if you put a property on auction, you will not need to worry about the buyer's agent commission.
Hey, Tiffany and Amy, this is Steve Trine at MetroTex. I'm trying to type a question in and it's not letting me type in. So, just when available, call on us and we'll.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
You had a question.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Typically at some of the auctions that I've been to, the buyer is usually responsible for the title or lien search. Are there any particular types of auctions that the buyer wouldn't have to necessarily worry about that in general?
I would say maybe it's some absolute auction circumstances. It's not all the absolute auction the buyer would not worry about. It's maybe in some circumstances. It's again depends on how the agreement written between the seller and the auction team and the listing agents. And for as far as I know, for the auction with reserve, usually the buyers need to take care of those
Okay.
costs.
Right.
But maybe you will find it at the some absolute auction.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So, and then just to follow up with this, the process. So a lot of times if you are listing a property on, in an MLS and you get an offer, then there will be negotiations about, say, what conveys, or, you have to get your inspection and all of that stuff. How does that fit into a property that's been purchased at auction? How do you work out those details post-auction if they've already agreed to the selling price?
All right, so every auction team works slightly different. So for me, those inspections, we usually run an inspection or title, research prior to the auction day. So those document that usually required in the traditional listing, we already have it done prior to the auction day to avoid some, to accelerate the closing process. At some absolute auction or the RU or foreclosure auction, sometimes maybe the buyers, those inspection has to be taken care after the auction day. But the auction is a way of selling the property. It's a way to attract the buyers and then get the price as high as we can. Everything else, the closing, everything else requirement by the real estate law has to be continue as the traditional site. And that's the reason, we have the realtors involved. Even without the listing agent, we still, we're required to get a license, or we're required to get a realtor involved to handle that process. So everything, all the paperwork that you normally do is going to be, the process, the steps is going to be the same as usual. It's just the way we sell the property is different.
Okay, so you guys basically drop out of the process once the auction has been completed, is that correct?
Yeah, if we work with realtors, if we work with listing agents,
Okay.
sometimes we do work with seller directly, then that's time we have to take care of everything.
Okay, all right. Steve, I see you guys have another question.
I'm noticing a trend with some of the questions that are being typed in. I have similar questions in terms of cost and in terms of a real estate agent or a seller trying to find a reputable auction company. Can you give any tips into how much will it typically cost, and how can an agent and or a seller, find a reputable auction company?
Okay, let me answer for a question. How much gonna cost the seller? So normally it will cost the seller less than the traditional. Again, I'm not gonna discuss about the percentage of commission at the traditional side. So in the auction side, what the seller gonna put as the cost from the seller is whatever the commission negotiate in your listing agreement, or you decided to adjust it, it's fully your control. And to the auction team, it's not a cost, but there will be a fee paid upfront. We call the marketing expenses. The seller has to pay upfront. That means before the auction, before everything begins, before we start doing the marketing campaign. I call it shared responsibility from the seller. So what happened is, if you have a listing and you think that's a good, property to be sold on auction, and the seller needs to sell it now instead of waiting. And then we decided it's a qualified candidate. So the next step happen is we will present an auction proposal before the seller sign a contract to be sold on auction. So in the auction proposal, we also present a proposed marketing plan. It listed very clearly every penny, how we gonna spend it, why we need to spend it, how we gonna attract, how many people we're gonna attract, and etc. So in that marketing plan, the seller, we can work together, how the seller expectation is financially and all that. But once it finalized, once the seller signed the auction agreement, that is the time the seller needs to put that amount up front, need to pay for it, so the marketing campaign can be kicked off. For us, in my opinion, it is not commission, it is not cost to the auction team. Every penny from that money solely for marketing purpose for the seller's property. So that's why I mentioned that you might want to adjust your commission based on that, because you don't want the seller to pay in addition to the traditional side fee structure. But that will be the cost from the seller side. And the second question, how you can find a reputable auction company. I think here I'm not giving names, but I would say the same criteria they're looking for any other, brokers or realtors. You're looking at how many real estate auctions that auction team sold in, previously in the past record history, and you want to know if they're fully capable of selling these type of properties, or even working well with the seller. I would say, the auction industry is a fairly small compared to other professional. There's only a certain amount of auction company that does real estate auction in Texas or in other states. So, I mean, for me, being a member of the National Auction Association, I would say they're all good. It's really depends on how they market. And I would say instead of looking at the company itself, I would suggest the seller or the listing agent looking at the auction proposal itself for your property only, because it doesn't really matter how good their past history was. It come to the end of the day, it's all about your property. It's all about your client property if they're able to sell it. If the auction proposal, the auction plan, the marketing plan makes sense to the seller. That the seller believes that if I were the buyer, when I look at those, the marketing, where I'm willing to invest the money, is that attractive enough to me as a buyer from the buyer's perspective? I think that should be the criteria for you to look at it instead of looking at the company itself or the team itself.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I have one more quick question. The sellers, do they typically have to pre-qualify? What happens if you get into a transaction, somebody has bid on your property in the auction, they win the auction, and then you get into the rest of the transaction and their loan doesn't qualify, or for some other reason they can't go through? What happens then?
We have to qualify the bidder before we let them register. So when we say qualify the bidder, primarily is financially ready. It doesn't have to be 100% necessarily cash payment. The bidder is allowed, the bidder, he or she is allowed to retain loan from a qualified mortgage company, but it cannot be a pre-approved letter. It has to be approved amount of a loan that ready for the buyers to spend. All those financial financial requirement has to be satisfied before we let them register. So by that says, when we open the bid and the bidder start, throwing the numbers, and then at the end we got the highest bid price, and that means the buyer is ready to pay. We have to qualify that. So that reduce heavily the post-auction process. That's why we say we can be after the auction day. The closing process normally take a couple weeks or a month, because the financial is already taken care. We already pre-qualified them before we let them register. And then that's a lot of time. It's reduced the concern to the seller. There's certain situation that, when you talk about the auction, the seller might be a little bit unsure about that, but the seller still decided to pursue the auction matter. But when on the auction day, or there are a lot of time happen very often, is we already have an offer prior to the auction day because of the marketing plan and all that kicking. So when you have that cash offer in front of the seller, and for example, if the property was listed overpriced, and when we get to the auction, and then the seller still decided to auction with reserve, the seller still set a reserve price. It looks a little bit less than the asking price, but might be still a little bit high to our opinion. But of course, we don't know how the market goes that day. You might have buyers offer more than asking price. It happened. But during that time, if the reserve price was still high, and then there's no way the final bid was still lower than a reserve, we go back to the seller, we presented all the bidding price in front of the seller and then with cash payment. There's all cash payment. As long as, basically you can tell the seller, if you say yes now, you're gonna get paid. It will be closed. There's no money issue. And a lot of time the seller would significantly consider taking that, even it's a little bit lower sometimes, but that means that's just the market price.
Right. So it's a bird in the hand, worth two in the bush situation.
Yeah.
And
And then sometimes, sometimes I would suggest the listing agent to consider the auction offer because, in some sellers, they're just having, hard hand that they want certain price.
right.
And then you put so much time, efforts on it. Of course you want to everybody wants to get paid for, deserve to be paid. And then you convince them, you present it, and the seller says, okay, yeah, I want it sold. And then the auction sounds good. But he's still very tough on the reserve price. Sometimes we would take it, even though the reserve price is higher than the price that we research. We got it through the research. But when you get down to the last steps on the auction day, when the seller look at it, it helped them to be more realistic at that time when they look at the numbers.
Right,
That
yeah.
might be one of the strengths.
It seems like getting those pre-qualification documents would give the client a very, very accurate idea of what the property is actually worth before they get to the auction.
Yeah, it is one of the advantage of using auction is there's no contingency.
Right.
Financially, or there's no other contingency. You always heard if you goes to auction very often, as the auction always sell as well as there's no contingency. That doesn't mean we don't disclose anything, but by law we require to disclose any defects. Everything is transparent. But the buyers, especially at the absolute auction, the buyers cannot withdraw their offer. They have to take it. Once they become the highest bidder, they have to pay for it.
So Maggie, I wanted to go back to the question about the upfront fee for the seller. I know it's probably difficult to nail down any sort of range because every property is going to be so specific and the proposal is going to look at very specific factors for that property. So could you maybe walk us through, I think you had an example on a previous slide about a winery that you had auctioned off. So maybe could you tell us about the seller's proposal, the auction proposal for that? Maybe what were the factors that were considered and how that affected that upfront costs or fee, as you had put it, for the seller?
Okay, so normally the upfront, I would go this way. Normally the shared marketing responsibility from the buyer normally is usually 1% to 2% of the appraised price. Now the asking price is the price that we got from our research. So if the winery appraised at $5 million, then you're looking at maybe 100,000 or 120,000 marketing expenses paid upfront by the seller. And it depends on the auction teams. From United Country, and normally United Country absorb at least 50% more auction marketing fees in addition to the seller's marketing expenses, because it's really it depends, how aggressive your marketing campaign is, and that would track how many buyers. And for that winery, usually for that winery, it was sold to a seller that's overseas. And those winery is a specialty property. If you put on the MLS or other local listing or on the commercial like a CoStar, again, what type of buyers in your mind would purchase winery? Very, very small percentage of individual buyer would want to pay that much money to buy a winery for their own, entertainment leisure. It will be most likely investors or somebody in wine business. So for those type of buyers, they're very sophisticated. You might see they have their private representative and they have their brokers. and they already know what type of property they're looking at, and they know what should be on that property, and they know what kind of document they want to look at it, what all those a profit and loss statement they look at it. So and then part of the auction marketing, of course you have your videos and you have all those 3Ds. So for buyers, sophisticated buyers, they don't have to be present. They don't have to come to the open house in order to, tour around the facility before they make their mind. For those investors and sophisticated buyers, when they look at the numbers, if the number works, makes sense to them, and they look at the 3D videos, they look at all the marketing, we already prepare enough information from different angles we can deliver to those potential buyers. They already had enough information for them to make decision. And of course, we need to qualify their finance. So there's no post-auction trouble when we close the auction. And that's why when I said the auction matter is actually very international. If you market right, if you expose your property in the right channel to the right group of buyers, it will surprise you on the price. Actually, the purchase price was a little higher than the asking price.
Okay, so we do have a few questions from folks who've been listening in. We've had several questions about the fee for the method or using the firm, and that seems to be it's the marketing cost based on the appraised value of the property, and then there is also a premium paid by the buyer that will also go toward that. So we seem to have covered that. Somebody asked what we can say to the seller to help convince them that the cost to auction is justified, but I think you've also talked a lot about that, about the pluses and minuses involved in doing that. Someone asks if you are affiliated with auction.com, or I guess you would say Xome.com, Xome.com, or is mayauctions.com is the site for your auctions? You guys are an independent shop, right, Maggie?
Yes, I own May Auctions. It is an auction brokerage, so I do not list any auction information because it's all exclusive. For my clientele and all that. So what I primarily do is I broke out the auctions. If I have buyers approach me overseas, I will send to them the auction, the current available auctions to them and all that. So I do not publish those. It's just for their privilege. And I'm not affiliated with the auction.com. As far as I know, the auction.com is beginning with IT company. They do partner with realtors or auctioneer, but again, they provide a platform to you. I do not know exactly how they work, but as far as I know is they provide that online bidding platform to you as a realtor. They facilitate the online auction, but I don't think they does all those traditional paperwork and all those closing. I don't think they do exclusive marketing to every single property. I believe that might be the downside to your clients to certain type of properties. And I am aware of there's some auctions posted on those type of online auction platform. A lot of properties, they're not allowed for open house and other things. They don't have enough information and so on. That's why I'm not in favor of that website and other similar website. Everything has to be, if it's a real estate auction, everything has to be followed by the real estate law. Right. So if you saw a property posted somewhere on the website, and if it says there's no open house allowed, you might want to do more research and think about it before you even bid. For me, by law, the buyer has right to inspect the property.
Right, right. And you mentioned earlier that, what did you say, it was the national auction, there was a organization. Is that a reliable place to look to find reputable auctioneers?
Yeah, you can definitely get on the National Auctioneers Association. We have all, list of auctioneers across the country. You can look into what type of auctions they do. Some they do, fundraising, personal property, and they do real estate property. That's definitely a good sign to get on and search for, the right fit for you.
All right.
But I want to make one more comments regarding offering the auction to your client. I would really emphasize that you consult with the auction team before you present it, because if the property is not good candidate for the auction, then I don't want you to present it to the seller, get the seller excited, and it's kind of jeopardize your relationship with your client. So please do consult with the auction team before you offer that, because there is a way. You have to be fully prepared to convince the seller.
Right. Somebody asked about other contract terms, or is it like a foreclosure auction where the buyers in a non-foreclosure auction has to pay for everything? But I think we discussed that earlier, how once the auction closes, the transaction proceeds as though it were just a regular kind of sale.
Yeah, and pay attention. If you represent a buyer, do pay attention to the auction terms and condition. Everything has to be listed in the terms and condition. Mm-hmm. So for such information, you should be able to locate it in the terms and condition, or you should inquiry to whoever facilitated the auction before you bid. For foreclosure type of auction, normally is absolute auction. So once you bid, you have the chance to be the winner. There's no way to withdraw.
And then our last question, and this is kind of a fun way to end things, is how happy are the sellers after the auction is concluded?
Well, it depends. As I mentioned, if you present that cash money in front of the seller, most of the over 95% time, the seller is very happy to see that cash money. Even sometimes it's lower than the seller's asking price. It makes such a difference when the money in front of them.
Yeah, everybody likes cash.
And they know exactly when they can get paid, so that's the thing make them happy. And as far as the buyer side, I did run into the conversation discussing about the buyers and the clients, the seller, the listing agent worry about the buyers having issue with the buyer's premium. I would say you should not worry about that. We educated them very well before they register, and of course, if the buyers from the auction channels, they're sophisticated enough to know they're not worried about the buyer's payment. It's just an additional fee, just like a tax. You gotta pay some tax. You gotta pay closing costs. It's the same. It's just additional closing costs to them.
Right. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. I think this was a really meaningful topic to kind of shed some light on a marketing tool that may not be considered traditionally. We have reached our time limit that we are allowed to have you for, and so we'll let you go. I'll follow up with you offline. But again, we really appreciate your time today and sharing with us the real estate auction process.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Amy, and thank you all for watching this. And if you have questions, just feel free to ask me. I will be happy to answer those questions for you or refer you out if you need help.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, for those of you that are still tuning in with us, please join us for our next commercial webinar on Tuesday, July 24th at 10 a.m. With Heather Konoka Chavez. She'll be giving us a presentation of her transaction that won the William C. Jennings Award for Commercial Transaction of the Year. And this upcoming webinar is also approved for CE, so we do encourage you to view it at an available proctored location to take advantage of that. Contact your local board to see if they're hosting, or feel free to contact Amy or John Hauser in our professional development department to set up a remote classroom. I couldn't leave you all without a little announcement about our annual Texas Realtors Conference. It's coming up. It'll be here before you know it, and registration is now open. It'll be in San Antonio from September 7th through the 11th. We're adding a lot of global programming this year, such as our look at legal issues with foreign investing in U.S. commercial real estate. We have an education session on business protocols with working with Chinese clients. So you can register for these conference events and more at TexasRealtorsConference.com. So finally, as I mentioned before, today's webinar was the first of our global series. So we'll certainly be looking to present more global topics throughout the year. So if you do have suggestions for topics or areas of a global practice that you would like to learn more about, feel free to shoot either Amy or I an email. My email address is twu@texasrealtors.com. And Amy's email is agamber@texasrealtors.com. So again, we're excited to be providing more global services to our members going forward. And your feedback is always appreciated.
And do you want me to show people where to find the slides when we get them posted?
Sure.
Okay, so if you are sticking with us, I am going to share my screen with you guys and show you where you'll be able to find the slideshow when we get that done. And that is, as you see right here on your TAR homepage, you go to events. We have this great events tool now, and you can go to webinars. I don't know if it will be upcoming or past as it is since we're in the process. But as you see here on this events list, you can scroll down and you can pick commercial, global, whatever. So this would be our global. And then you want to filter, say, past and future, filter, although it's already there. And what we'll do is right here in this, when you click on that, we're going to edit that so that there will be a link to the slideshow. Ta-da! There it is already. And we'll also post on this part a link to the video on our YouTube channel so that you can watch that there. And if that is confusing again, just reach out to any of us and we will be happy to direct you. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Yeah.